Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are for another day of Wednesday in the Word. And we have with us today Morgan Goodman. And he is the next gen pastor at Southside Christian Fellowship in Winter Garden. And he is also one of our newest members on the student ministries team. And Morgan, glad you could be with us today.
Thanks, Joe. I'm glad to be here.
I'm I'm glad that you are. Morgan has been a full-time youth pastor at Southside Church now for a little over a year and almost a year and a half, maybe. Morgan, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, or tell us about yourself if you want. Either one of those.
Yeah, well, for those of you that don't know me, I actually grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee. The epicenter, if you will. Had a lot of really good connections within the church there. Really grew up, at Key Street, and every part of who I am comes from there. And so, grew up there, went off to college in West Tennessee. Learned a lot about ministry in those 4 years I was away at college. Learned a lot about really meeting kids where they are. Learned a lot about relational ministry, which I think we'll probably get to that later, but I think that's something that COVID really exposes some weaknesses in that. And then, just learned a lot about leading leaders, and not saying, I know exactly how to do a lot of that, but when it comes to leading leaders, it's so important understanding, leaders are everything. But so I learned a lot about that during my college years. I got a undergrad degree in oh my goodness, what was it? In finance. Yeah, almost forgot there for a second. And it was actually really crazy because I had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated. I went into college thinking something completely different than what was happening. And out of the blue, I remember it was one Saturday, and I was watching the Michigan-Ohio State football game. Not a fan of either of the teams, as you can tell, but I was just watching it, and I get this random phone call from a guy named Shell Sullivan, asking me to come down to Winter Garden and check out his church. And I was like, well, why not? And so one thing led to another, and so that kind of was what brought me down here. It's actually a really crazy story. I can actually literally say that God, physically had called me down here. I don't think many people get that opportunity. But yeah, and so that's what I got. That is how I got down here. And since down here, there's been a lot of awesome things been going on. So kind of what I was saying earlier, one of the first things I wanted to do when we got down here is really provide a little bit more structure to our ministry, to our efforts, the whole divide and conquer kind of deal. When we had one really big group of kids, and so I kind of pulled aside some of those who I was like, hey, you can do this thing that we call ministry really well. And so really wanted to kind of delegate and designate at the same time, and kind of bring in leaders to help me kind of, one, figure out what we're doing, but also, have a little bit more of a, in schools, they call it like student to faculty ratio. But I think in the same way, with ministry, it's, a disciple to discipler ratio, I guess. And so really working on that. And so, and that's, I think, one of the really awesome benefits, being full-time, is that I can spend a lot of time with my leaders, and a lot of time with the kids. And so what that produces and what that creates is, longevity. And I think that's something that is so hard right now for our, high school and middle school and even the young adult kids, is having people come and go so often. And I think that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Is just, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts too about the longevity of ministry and how it's so important to do what you need to do to make sure that you stay for a while, and take care of those things. But anyways, yeah, so right now, currently, we're kind of taking this model of this relational ministry, and we're trying to apply it across the board. And so what that looks like is really just leaders leading others, disciple makers, disciples making disciples make disciples. And so that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of, intentional one-on-one time. And so we kind of really center our model around, we have, even though, COVID's going on, we have opened back up. And so we are going with, a little bit of a small group model, also with some one-on-one model. And so, of course, we have our Sunday morning gathering, which we're back in person for. And so that's really just everybody, come as you are. Then we have a middle school class that actually stems from that Sunday morning because of our 2 services. And then Sunday nights, we have our young adult group, which is anyone basically out of high school, a little bit older, needing that kind of crew they can relate with. And so we have that group, which actually Michaela McDonald leads, and she's doing a phenomenal job with that. And so it's really awesome because seeing her as someone who, walking in here was a young adult, seeing her and recognizing like some of her gifts and stuff. And so bringing her into that and saying, hey, like you have this, like take some of this responsibility. And that's something I've learned, is that, what helps leaders grow isn't delegating tasks, but delegating responsibility. Letting her lead. And so she's led really well. And so she's been very intentional with the girls on that, and even the guys. And so we have a really great small group that's come out of this. And so she's killing it with that. And then we also plan, fun things from that, plan some one-on-one times throughout the week, or just meeting with people, checking in, really putting people first, and having this love that has no strings attached. And then on Wednesdays, so we actually, Michaela also, because she's so excited and because she's crushing it right now, she actually just started another class for really anybody. She's like, I'm tired of us not doing like something on Wednesdays. And so she's like, let's do something. And I'm like, look, here are the keys, man, you go.
Awesome.
So she started this Bible initiative class, where it's really, and that's the thing too, we're kind of structuring our groups a little differently, because now that we have this Bible initiative class, that's very like, depth. It's almost like open up your study Bible and you're like, okay, boom, boom, boom. And it's really just thorough in its approach. So that gives us a little bit more, room on our Sunday night group. We open it up, we make it a little bit longer of a night, a little bit more laid back, more of like, if comparing Bible versions, it's like Wednesday night's the ESV study Bible, and then like Sunday night would be like the NLT or like the Message or something, And so it's kind of like really pulling it back. So it gives us a little bit more evangelical approach to Sunday night. We just had this new couple that came in, and I think that was a big part of why. Really just togetherness, really bringing people in. But anyways, yeah. So all that's going really well. Michaela's crushing it. And so we also have a high school group that meets on Wednesday nights. And so again, smaller group, really one-on-one, not one-on-one exactly for Wednesday night, but really just very relationally oriented, want to just get to know them, want to get to know people and kind of build those relationships. I love the quote. It's kind of cliche at this point, but I think things become cliche because they are true 90% of the time. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so, we're spending a lot of this first year really, really caring. I think really trying hard to care and to love kids where they're at, and to not force anything on them, make them feel obligated, but really just loving them the way that we feel like Jesus does. And so that's also really fun. And then, we also have some time where our leaders try to get together on Saturday mornings and, spend time together and kind of talk about what we're doing, talk about what we want to do, go through some leadership qualities, as well as just kind of like be there for each other as well. And so among all of that, there's twists and turns, but that's really like where our approach is currently in this season. So hope that wasn't too much. I kind of just rambled there for a bit.
No, that's great. I mean, I some of those, I attend Southside myself, and some of those things I don't think I knew you guys were doing. So that's really cool. I really like how that you're identifying and helping to equip youth, or especially the older youth or young adults,
Mm-hmm.
to be involved in the ministry and to lead. I also noticed you really didn't mention any events. Oftentimes we tend to approach youth ministries as like planning special services or something like that, which is, I mean, it's okay. And I know you guys do some events, but I
Right.
know it seems that your focus is more on, ongoing ministries and how to address the needs of some specific subgroups, because that's been a huge issue over many years of dealing with youth. Is that we've got oftentimes 12-year-olds through 18 or 19 or 20-year-olds
Right.
sitting there in the same group, which it's while I'm not a, it's nothing wrong with that. It's
Right.
really hard. It's really hard to
Yeah.
meet the needs of those guys in that manner, because obviously, without even having to really say it, a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old, different worlds that you're facing.
Mhm.
And I really like how that you've done that, because when you're saying you got different ones that we're working with, and then we're training them. And again, one of the things that really stood out to me that I like is delegating tasks versus delegating responsibilities. And I think that's huge, because now even you mentioned Michaela, so we're moving beyond youth ministries. And while we're including it, you got one avenue where anybody can come, and they can work together and learn, which again speaks to something that I like, is being able to uh, bridge the generations, sort of thing. We don't want to just keep kids off in another room by themselves, just the youth by themselves, just the
Mhm.
adults by themselves. There's times for that, but the time to come together and worship the same God and learn and from each other, I think that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. That's great, and I thank the Lord for that. I was kind of wondering. I know you work a lot with students. What do you see as one of the biggest, maybe the biggest, or certainly one of the biggest issues or things that they're facing right now? What are we facing, or are they facing?
Yeah, I think right now there's a lot of things that um, they're facing. I think that's clear. I think some of the things that come to mind immediately, obviously because of COVID, is the loneliness, and I think that's kind of what I was even hinting at earlier, talking about how, I was either reading a book, or can't remember what I was doing, but I was learning about how, it was one of my seminary classes. That's what it was. One of my professors was talking about how COVID has exposed a lot of these weaknesses of our churches. Because he's saying we become so used to everybody coming up on a Sunday morning performing this really great service, like all these really great things that come from that, which is awesome. But then it's like, all those people Monday through, they can come in on Sunday morning and leave without anybody noticing them. They can come in, and they can really be a part of a church without really being a part of the church. Um, and there's no relationship there. And so I think right now, because of we can't do some of the things that we're used to doing, we're realizing that there's not the relationships that, I guess, the relationships that aren't there that we thought were there are being kind of exposed. And I think kids are feeling that so much more than we are, because they're the ones who are like, you're like, dang, I thought I had this, or I thought I was in this, or I thought this was, with me or for me. And so, thinking about how, now, I mean, especially not, they didn't have school for a while. And then now they're went in school, and then now schools are closing again. And it's kind of like they're just losing a lot of that social interaction, that connection. Which makes sense. And that would be hard on anybody, because we're not made to live in isolation, or, and so I think right now, a really big part of things that are really hurting is the disconnect, simply, because we can't connect. I feel like sometimes we have this kind of mile wide, inch deep approach, or this shotgun approach, and I think that has, been okay, because up until now it hasn't been, the flaws in that haven't been exposed. And not that there's anything wrong with that in the degree, but it has to be followed with the mile deep, philosophy. And so I think when we think about, our church and what we're doing, and our kids and our friends, we have to really be intentional about those relationships. And I just think it's really hard to do a lot of times. But I think at the end of the day, that's something that is really hard. But I think that that's something that's worth it at the same time. And so that kind of also I'll say this is the last thing I'll say about that. I think also that is another reason why it's so important to, bring in other leaders. Because me as a leader, one of the first things we talked about in our leadership workshop is like the law of the lid. It's one of John Maxwell's laws. It's like you as one person only have so much. Like, this mug that I have can only be filled to the top of it, and then it's done. And then it can't be filled anymore. And so what you do is you don't just put a lid on it and leave. You go grab a bunch of other mugs, and it's like, and so it's really, bringing in others so you can be, spread that ministry, spread that, expand those relationships. Not because you as one person does more, but you can pour into, 6 to 12 people who pour into 6 to 12 other people. And it creates this cycle, this domino effect of really healthy, which I think is something else that is important, but healthy ministry where the people ministering are healthy and the people being ministered to are gaining in health. And so I think that's something that kids really need.
So I think that's huge there. Some of those things that you've mentioned, because I think that speaks back to the sustainability portion you were talking about. Because, it takes time, and it's, you don't disciple or you don't grow a person in one service. I mean, you might introduce the gospel and they might say, okay, and then repent and accept, and their lives are forever changed, and their sins are forgiven and they're going to heaven. But there's still a lot left.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's, it's a lot to navigate for anybody, but especially when you're particularly young and you're like, what do I do next? How does that work? And we sometimes tend to almost encourage our leaders, you just go, 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 and burn it out for Jesus. And it's like,
Right.
there's seasons like that, but you don't usually sustain that over time. And then was that really such a good thing? Was that really helpful? So again, the shared leadership or shared responsibility. And I think when other people start to catch on to that, listen, I'm responsible for this versus Morgan asked me to go do this thing, a task. Now, tasks occur and tasks are important, but if I feel like I'm responsible for a ministry or a section of a ministry, I'm probably going to be more likely to be thinking that way than if you just tell me, Joe, go bring cookies tonight. Okay,
Yeah.
well, somebody's got to bring cookies or whatever you're going to do, but that's not the same thing. And when you get your people working towards that, I think that's good. And as far as the loneliness piece, I think you're exactly right. I think that's happening to a lot of people, but particularly our students. And I know you mentioned some of the stuff you're doing, but do you have anything specific that you guys have talked about? So what is going to be our response to the loneliness that we're seeing or the isolation that we're sensing with the kids that you work with? What are we doing?
Yeah. I think that's the $1,000,000 question. What are we going to do differently? And again, I was learning about how, this COVID thing isn't really a time like when we come back, like 100%, when we're fully back, are we really going to go? Are we trying to do the same exact thing that we've been doing?
Right.
Because maybe God is trying to shake some of that off of us. And the verse that I go to a lot is, in 1 Thessalonians 2:8, Paul says, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. So this to me encompasses a lot of relational, patient, slow ministry. I think it's so, and that's the thing too. I've learned that working and being in a church, whether it's talked about or not, there's always pressure. There's pressure for growth, and I think sometimes, like, obviously that looks a bunch of different ways. But I say this because I think what what we need to do and what we need to communicate to our kids and simply to encourage them is the fact that, like, hey, like, we're here, and we're going to pursue you, and we're going to come after you, and we're going to spend time with you, and we're going to love you. Not in a way that's like, hey, come to this event, so to speak, but it's, hey, let's go waste time together. That's a phrase that I love because I also hate it at the same time because I'm like, I hate the idea of wasting time. I think time is one of the most precious things. It's the only thing that we have that we can never get more of. And so when I read this verse, it's, you know, it's like, hey, let's share time together. And so I think my encouragement would be, whether to a kid or whether to a leader, is simply, hey, let's go waste time with our high school friends or middle school friends or college friends or whatever it is, because, like, I think that communicates so much. A buddy of mine who just got married, he was telling me how we spend our time. He was talking about him and his wife. He's saying how you spend your time communicates a lot about what you think and what you feel. And so I think the same way with our time, if we are spending time just one-on-one, just small groups, just being together, like breaking bread and just laughing and sharing experiences. If we're doing that together, I think that goes so much further than we realize, especially in this time of loneliness.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. I think it's a great answer. That's that whole part of, you know, spending or pouring your life, part of your life into other people. That is huge. I mean, you can listen to wonderful speakers on a podcast or on television or whatever, and not diminishing what they're doing, but that's not the same effect as spending time with someone. And I think that's one of the things where local church communities really are vital. Because it's not because you can't just go somewhere and hear a good sermon, because I don't know of a time there's ever been the availability of more good sermons, and that's important, and I like to listen to them.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's not minimizing that, but there's more to it than that. There's more to it than that, and I think that relational piece is like, I agree with you. That's huge, and to be able to, haven't quite heard it like that, but to waste time together, I'm sure that communicates a lot. It's particularly, I don't know, it probably does to everybody, but particularly I see that in students where because it's not just I'm important enough for you to be with me, or for us to be together, a group of us or whatever, not just, show up for the Bible study or whatever. Those are important. But again, spending that time together, I like that. So that obviously would certainly be a way to address the isolation and the loneliness, because a lot of people feel that. A lot of our youth feel that, because you already know you can be around a bunch of people but still be very lonely, because that's not the same thing as
right.
relating to someone. So I like that a lot. Let me ask you, we're going to probably need to wrap it up, but
Yeah.
what if you wanted to, if you could share with us something that maybe that you would communicate to that student, to that youth, what would that be? What would you want to share with them? Say, listen, this is something I want you to know. Anything that you could think of there?
Yeah, I guess so. Of course, there's a couple things, and obviously, and I think this is something too that makes it hard, is because I've learned it's really hard to, I guess it's different when you're preaching, but when you're teaching on something, when you're talking to somebody, you kind of have to know them really well before you can offer advice. I think sometimes we assume that it's easy to just, oh, I know this, so this is what you need to do. But I think if I were talking to anybody, conversations I've had recently have gone along the lines of, why is, obviously, there's if God is good, why is this happening? Or like, why are things so hard? Why do I feel this way? Why am I so alone? And I think the thing that's hard to understand but very real is reminding ourselves, like, God is present. God is there. God is here. And I think sometimes we think just because we don't see him or just because we don't feel him means that he's not. And I think it's, just the opposite. Even yesterday I was reading in Proverbs 25, and it's saying, it's the glory of God to conceal things, and it's the glory of kings to reveal things. And just thinking how, God often doesn't make sense to us. Thank goodness, because if he did, then I would be really concerned. I love the idea of not understanding what God's doing a lot of times, but I think that's what gives us the the courage and motivation to know that, God is so good and he's so present, and he's moving, in so many different ways. And I think right now it's hard to see that because we can only see so much. It's like driving your car at night. You can only see how far your headlights go. And right now our headlights are really just our understanding. We can only see as far as our understanding takes us. But there's a depth. There is so much more behind the scenes of God and where he's at. And a lot of times I think we look for him, out in the road with our headlights. We look for him out in the front. But I think the reality is that God's not, out in the road, like in the darkness. God's right there with us. He's in the car with us. He's with us in it. And he's not on the outside looking in, but he's on the inside holding on. And so I think that would just be my encouragement to really anybody who feels alone or who feels confused, or who feels, lost or even broken, even saddened by all this is that God is here. God is with us in the car, or if you will, or in your home, or, on the couch, or whatever it is for you. God is there and God is present. And so I think we can just rest in the fact that whether we see it, whether we feel it, whether we even, understand it, it's kind of irrelevant. It's true. And so I just want to invite really anybody and everybody into that truth. And so my encouragement would be to act on that and just grab a cup of coffee, sit somewhere and just be with Jesus and see where that takes you.
Man. All right. Well, Morgan, I appreciate you taking time out of your really busy schedule and sharing. Not only do we have COVID to deal with, but there's so many other things going on in our world that our students are hurting from, or scared, or confused, like you mentioned. But God is there with us, and I think if one of the huge things is if we can remember that and share that love with each other, and even regardless of age, really, but still, particularly because we're talking about this segment,
Right.
but
Right.
particularly there to show that God does care and he does love. And I appreciate you sharing that. So I think what we'll close this out. It's been good. We look forward to continuing to work with you on our student ministries team. As I mentioned, Morgan, along with some others, have recently joined our team. So we want to utilize these guys to help us figure out how to minister to children, youth, young adults, to be better and more effective ministers. So we love you guys, and I am very glad that that you joined us today. Lord bless you. Morgan, we'll see you later.
All righty, Joe. Thank you so much, man.
God bless.
See ya.